I still remember the sound of the rain hitting the windshield of my Honda Accord that night. It was that heavy, unrelenting Midwestern downpour that makes the highway lines blur into a smear of yellow and white. I was driving back from a 3-day corporate conference in Chicago, a city that usually energized me but had left me feeling completely drained this time around. All I wanted was to crawl into my own bed, pull the duvet over my head, and sleep for 12 hours straight. My wife Sarah had expected me back by noon the next day, but the final workshop had wrapped up early, and instead of staying another night at the Hilton eating overpriced room service, I decided to make the 4-hour drive back to our suburban home just outside of Indianapolis. I didn't even call her to let her know. I wanted to surprise her. I thought it would be a romantic gesture, walking through the front door at midnight, cutting my trip short just to be close to her. Looking back, that decision was the precise moment my old life ended, and the nightmare began. To understand why I was so eager to get home, you have to understand who Sarah was to me. We had been married for 4 years, together for 7. She was a graphic designer with a laugh that could brighten the dimmest room and an easygoing nature that perfectly balanced my anxious, analytical mind.
We had bought our 3-bedroom house 2 years prior, a charming craftsman style with a big backyard where we envisioned raising kids one day. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was comfortable, built on a foundation of mutual trust and shared dreams. Or so I blindly believed. Then there was Marcus. Marcus had been my best friend since our freshman year at Ohio State. We had shared cramped dorm rooms, survived terrible hangovers, and stood by each other through the messy transitions of our 20s. He was the kind of guy who could charm anyone within 5 minutes of meeting them, always ready with a joke or a hand on your shoulder. But Marcus had fallen on hard times recently. A messy divorce from his ex-wife had stripped him of most of his savings, and a sudden corporate downsizing had left him unemployed. When he called me 3 weeks prior, sounding broken and defeated, asking if he could crash on our couch for a little while until he got back on his feet, I didn't hesitate. I didn't even need to consult Sarah, though I did, and she was entirely supportive. We had a spare room that we used as a home office, but we put a comfortable air mattress in there and told him our home was his home. I felt a deep sense of pride knowing I could be there for my brother when he was at his lowest. The first couple of weeks had been fine. Marcus was respectful, keeping his things neat, and constantly apologizing for taking up space. He would help around the house, mowing the lawn or washing the dishes after Sarah cooked dinner. Sometimes I'd come home from my job as a financial analyst and find the two of them sitting at the kitchen island, laughing over some story Marcus was telling about our college days. It warmed my heart. I loved seeing the two most important people in my life getting along so well. I felt like the luckiest man alive, surrounded by love and loyalty. But as I pulled into our quiet, tree-lined cul-de-sac that rainy night, a strange sensation washed over me. The neighborhood was completely dark, save for the flickering glow of a street lamp at the corner. As my headlights swept across our driveway, I noticed Marcus's battered silver Ford Focus parked on the left side, right where he always left it. The house itself was dark, except for a single dim light casting a faint amber glow from the master bedroom upstairs. My chest tightened slightly, though I couldn't explain why. I attributed it to the exhaustion of the long drive and the eerie silence of the midnight hour. I parked the car, turned off the ignition, and sat in the silence for a moment, listening to the rhythmic clicking of the cooling engine. I grabbed my duffel bag from the passenger seat, stepped out into the pouring rain, and hurried up the front porch steps. I unlocked the front door as quietly as possible, careful not to let the deadbolt click too loudly. Stepping into the foyer, the familiar scent of our home hit me. Lavender plug-ins mixed with the faint aroma of the cedarwood candles Sarah loved. I kicked off my wet sneakers, leaving my bag by the coat rack, intending to creep upstairs and surprise Sarah with a quiet kiss on the forehead. The house was incredibly still. As I walked past the living room, I glanced toward the home office where Marcus was supposed to be sleeping. The door was wide open, and even in the shadows, I could see that the air mattress was empty, the blankets tossed carelessly to one side. I figured he was probably downstairs getting a glass of water, or maybe he was asleep on the basement couch watching TV. I didn't think much of it. I began to ascend the hardwood stairs, stepping deliberately near the wall where the steps were less likely to creak. With every step I took, the silence of the house seemed to grow heavier, almost suffocating. When I reached the top landing, I noticed that our bedroom door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light cutting across the dark hallway carpet. And then I heard it. It wasn't a loud noise, just a faint, rhythmic sound that made my breath catch in my throat. A soft rustle of sheets, followed by a low, muffled murmur. My heart began to thud against my ribs, a sudden violent adrenaline rush flooding my system. I froze in the middle of the hallway, my mind scrambling to find a logical explanation. Maybe Sarah was watching a movie on her iPad. Maybe she was having a nightmare, but deep down, in that primal, instinctual part of my brain, I knew something was terribly wrong. The tone of the sound wasn't right. It was intimate. It was breathless. I moved closer to the door, my feet feeling heavy, like I was walking through wet cement. The air in the hallway felt freezing cold. Through the narrow crack of the door, the amber light of the bedside lamp illuminated a section of our room. I could see the edge of our wooden headboard, the one Sarah and I had picked out together at a local antique market. I pushed the door open just an inch further. The hinges didn't make a sound. The scene that registered in my eyes didn't make sense at first. My brain actively rejected the visual data it was receiving, trying desperately to protect me from the shattering reality. I saw Sarah. Her long blonde hair was tangled, falling over her bare shoulders. But she wasn't alone. Tangled in the sheets with her, his back to me, was a man with a distinct, large tattoo of a phoenix sprawling across his right shoulder blade. It was Marcus. I stood there, paralyzed, watching my best friend of 10 years and my wife of 4 years wrapped in each other's arms in the bed I slept in every night. The betrayal was so visceral, so sudden, that I literally felt a sharp physical pain in my chest, as if someone had driven a stake through my sternum.
The world around me seemed to tilt, the sounds of their muffled whispers and the rain outside crashing together into a deafening roar in my ears. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I was trapped in a horrific, waking nightmare, watching the foundation of my entire existence crumble to dust in a single, silent second. The shock was a physical weight that pressed down on my chest, burying me under an avalanche of disbelief and sudden, suffocating grief. For a few agonizing seconds, my brain scrambled, trying to piece together a reality where what I was seeing wasn't real. I wanted to believe it was a trick of the light, a terrible hallucination born from highway hypnosis and exhaustion. But the dim, amber glow of the bedside lamp didn't lie. It illuminated the familiar contours of my wife's face, her eyes closed, a soft expression of complete contentment on her lips that I hadn't seen in months. And it shone on Marcus, the man I called my brother, whose hands were resting on her waist with an easy, practiced familiarity that proved this was not the first time. The pain was instantaneous, a roaring fire that started in my stomach and surged up into my throat. Every memory I had with either of them scrambled into a distorted, mocking montage. I thought of Marcus crying on our couch 3 weeks ago, telling me I was the only person in the world he could count on. I thought of Sarah kissing my cheek before I left for Chicago, telling me to drive safely and that she couldn't wait for me to get back. It had all been a performance. I had opened the doors to my sanctuary, handed the keys to my best friend, and he had used my generosity to dismantle my life from the inside out while I was away trying to provide for my family. A cold, dangerous numbness began to replace the initial paralysis. The absolute silence of my approach meant they still had no idea I was standing in the doorway, a ghost watching the wreckage of his own life. My hands curled into fists so tight that my fingernails cut into my palms. A dark, primal urge flared up inside me. I wanted to burst through the door. I wanted to drag Marcus out of my bed by his hair, to feel my knuckles connect with his jaw until the betrayal was washed away in blood. I wanted to scream at Sarah until her ears bled, to demand to know how she could look at me every morning and pretend to love me while harboring this sickness. But as I raised my hand to push the door wide open, something shifted inside me. A bitter, icy clarity took hold of my mind. If I reacted now,
If I let the rage consume me and turn this into a violent confrontation in the middle of the night, I would lose all control. They would see my brokenness, my desperation, and my weakness. They would have the power to spin the narrative, to call the police, to turn my justified anger into something dangerous and unstable.
No, I realized with a chilling certainty. They had stolen my dignity in the dark, but I would not let them steal my future. I needed to see exactly how deep this route went. I needed to know the truth before I let them know I knew. I slowly backed away from the door, my bare feet making absolutely no sound on the plush hallway carpet. Every step backward felt like a betrayal of myself, a cowardly retreat, but it was a calculated, tactical withdrawal. I crept down the stairs, each riser a minefield of potential creaks, until I reached the dark kitchen. I stood by the granite island, the very place where I had watched them laughing together just days ago, and stared out the window into the black, rain-slicked backyard. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, and my breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. I needed proof. In the modern world, a man's word meant nothing in a divorce court, especially against a cheating spouse who could claim alienation of affection or spin a web of lies to protect her assets. If I confronted them now with nothing but my own eyes as witness, they could deny it later, call me crazy, or minimize it as a one-time mistake born of loneliness. I needed cold, hard, undeniable evidence that would destroy any defense they tried to build. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my iPhone. My fingers were shaking so violently I almost dropped it on the hardwood floor. I took a deep breath, forcing the tremors to subside, and unlocked the screen. I opened the app for our home security system. We had a Ring doorbell at the front, a camera over the garage, and a single indoor camera in the living room that we kept active when we went on vacation to watch our old cat before she passed away. We rarely turned the indoor one on anymore, but as I logged into the account, I realized with a jolt of adrenaline that I had never fully deactivated the cloud storage subscription. I tapped on the history log, my thumb hovering over the screen. My heart did a sickening flip. There were dozens of motion alerts over the past 3 weeks, mostly during the daytime hours when I was at the office. I clicked on a video clip from 4 days ago, muted the volume, and watched the tiny screen. The video showed the living room couch. Sarah was sitting there, reading a book, when Marcus walked into the frame holding 2 glasses of wine. He handed her one, then sat down dangerously close to her. Within 2 minutes, the body language shifted. He put his arm around the back of the couch. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned her head back, laughing at something he said, before turning her face toward him. The kiss that followed wasn't a sudden mistake. It was passionate, deep, and completely comfortable. The camera caught the entire sequence before cutting off after its preset 60 seconds. I felt a wave of nausea hit me so hard, I had to lean against the kitchen counter to keep from collapsing. Seeing it happen in real time upstairs was a shock, but seeing the recorded history of their deceit proved that my entire marriage had been a lie for weeks, if not longer. They had been parading their affair right under my nose, using my house, my furniture, and my trust as their personal playground. I spent the next 20 minutes standing in the dark kitchen, methodically downloading every single compromising clip to my phone, then uploading them to a secure cloud drive that Sarah had no access to. I created a hidden folder, labeling it with a cold, detached clinical precision, evidence. With every clip that saved, another layer of the man I used to be died, replaced by a calculating, hollow shell driven entirely by self-preservation and a quiet, burning desire for total ruinous retribution. Once the files were safe, I knew I couldn't stay in the house. If I stayed, the pressure inside my chest would eventually blow, and I would walk upstairs and do something that would land me in a jail cell. I couldn't let them win that way. I picked up my duffel bag from the foyer, quietly unlocked the front door, and slipped back out into the pouring rain. The cold water soaking through my shirt helped ground me. I got into my Accord, started the engine without turning on the headlights, and backed out of the driveway into the empty street. I drove blindly for a few miles until I found a brightly lit 24-hour Walmart parking lot. I parked under the harsh glare of a halogen light, turned off the engine, and let the tears finally come. I wept open-mouthed, violent, silent sobs that shook my entire frame, mourning the death of the life I thought I had,
and the realization that the two people I loved most in the world had utterly destroyed me. When the tears finally stopped, a profound, icy silence settled into my bones. The grief was gone, replaced by a cold, unwavering focus. I looked at the digital clock on my dashboard. It was 1:45 a.m. I had 8 hours before Sarah expected me home. It was time to plan. I spent the rest of that endless night sitting in the Walmart parking lot, watching the rain wash over my windshield under the harsh glare of the parking lot lights. By 4 a.m., the tears had completely dried, leaving my face feeling tight and my eyes burning. The devastating grief that had hollowed me out just hours ago was being systematically replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. I was done reacting. I was done being the victim in a story scripted by my cheating wife and my treacherous best friend. If they wanted to play a game of deception in my own home, I was going to ensure that I was the one who dictated how it ended. My first call was to a man named Richard Vance. He was a high-powered family law attorney in downtown Indianapolis, whom my company had retained for some corporate restructuring legalities a year prior. I knew he was expensive, and I knew he was ruthless. I left a voicemail on his office line at 5:30 a.m., keeping my voice entirely flat, devoid of the shaking panic I felt inside. I stated my name, told him I had definitive photographic and video evidence of marital misconduct, and requested an emergency consultation for 8:30 a.m. that very morning. Next, I pulled up our joint banking app on my phone. Watching the digital numbers on the screen felt like looking at a stranger's life. We had a shared savings account with a little over $42,000 in it, money we had been aggressively hoarding for a down payment on a larger home in a better school district for the children we had planned to have. It sickened me to think that while I was calculating interest rates and budgeting for our future, she was calculating how to slip my best friend into our bed. I didn't drain the account completely. Richard had warned me in a casual conversation months ago about how bad that looks to a family court judge, but I legally transferred exactly half of the balance into a brand new sole occupancy checking account at a completely different bank that I opened online right there in my car. $21,000 shifted with a single tap of my thumb. The financial cord was officially cut. At 8 a.m., the rain finally tapered off into a dreary, overcast gray sky. I drove downtown, parked in the underground garage of a sleek glass skyscraper, and rode the elevator up to the 24th floor.
Richard Vance looked exactly like the kind of man you want in your corner when your life is burning down. He was in his mid-50s, wore a pristine, tailored gray suit, and possessed an intense, unblinking stare that made it clear he didn't tolerate bullshit. I sat across from him in his expansive office, the city sprawl spreading out behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows. I didn't offer a dramatic monologue. I didn't break down. I simply slid my phone across his mahogany desk, opened the hidden cloud folder, and hit play on the security footage. Richard watched the screen in silence, his expression completely unreadable as the clips played out. When the final video ended, he slid the phone back to me, leaned back in his leather chair, and clasped his hands together. He told me that in our state, while infidelity doesn't automatically guarantee a massive financial windfall due to no-fault divorce laws, the sheer nature of the evidence, combined with the fact that she brought her lover into the marital home while I was supporting him financially, gave us an incredible amount of leverage. He told me we could file for an expedited divorce, request an immediate order for her to vacate the property, and protect my retirement accounts from being plundered. We spent the next 2 hours drafting the paperwork. Richard's paralegal worked at a lightning pace, typing up the petition for dissolution of marriage. As I signed my name on the dotted lines, each signature felt like a hammer blow, shattering another piece of my past. We arranged for a private process server, a no-nonsense former police officer named Gary, to have the papers ready. Richard looked at me, a faint, grim smile on his face, and asked when I wanted them served. I looked at the clock. It was 11 a.m. Sarah expected me home by noon. I told Richard I wanted Gary at my house at exactly 12:30 p.m. I wanted to be there to see the look on her face when the reality of what she had done finally caught up to her. Driving back to the suburbs felt surreal. The sun was trying to break through the clouds, casting a bright, sterile light over the familiar streets. I felt like a ghost returning to a house I used to own. When I pulled into the driveway at 20 minutes past noon, Marcus's Ford Focus was still parked there. The sight of it didn't make my blood boil this time. Instead, it filled me with a strange, clinical detachment. The trap was set.
I unlocked the front door and walked into the foyer, deliberately making noise this time. I dropped my duffel bag heavily onto the floor and called out, "Hey, honey, I'm home early." Within seconds, I heard hurried footsteps from upstairs. Sarah came down the stairs first, wearing an oversized gray sweater and a pair of leggings.
She looked beautiful, her hair tied up in a messy bun, a bright smile on her face that looked so utterly genuine, it almost made me admire her acting skills. Marcus followed a moment later, wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants, rubbing his eyes as if he had just woken up. "Oh my gosh, babe!" Sarah exclaimed, rushing down the final steps and throwing her arms around my neck. The scent of her perfume, the same lavender and cedar, hit me, and it took every ounce of my willpower not to physically recoil from her touch. "You didn't tell me you were driving back last night. I thought you were staying in Chicago." "Yeah, man," Marcus chimed in, walking over with a relaxed, easy grin, holding out his hand for a fist bump. "We weren't expecting you till later. Good to have you back, brother." I looked at his outstretched hand, the same hand I had seen on my wife's waist in the dim amber light of our bedroom. I didn't take it. Instead, I stood entirely still, keeping my arms at my sides, looking back and forth between the two of them. The silence in the foyer suddenly stretched out, thick and suffocating. The smile on Sarah's face began to falter, her eyes starting to Marcus, then back to me, her intuition finally picking up on the freezing temperature in the room. "Is everything okay, sweetie?" she asked, her voice dropping an octave, a note of hesitation creeping into her tone. "You look really tired. Did something happen at the conference?" "The conference was fine," I said, my voice shockingly calm, hollowed out of all emotion. "But the drive back was interesting. I got home a little earlier than you think." Marcus's posture shifted instantly, his shoulders tensed and his easygoing smile vanished, replaced by a sudden, sharp alertness. Sarah frowned, laughing nervously, stepping back a half inch. "What do you mean? What time did you get back?" Before I could answer, the heavy brass knocker on our front door sounded 3 times. The sharp metallic cracks echoed through the quiet house like gunshots. Sarah startled, looking at the door in confusion. "Who could that be?" "Why don't you get that, Sarah?" I said, gesturing toward the door with a cold, polite nod. "I think it's for you." Sarah hesitated for a fraction of a second, her eyes scanning my face as if searching for a punchline to a joke she didn't understand. When she found nothing but a blank, frozen stare, she slowly turned around and walked toward the heavy oak door. Marcus stood frozen near the bottom of the stairs, his weight shifting uneasily from one foot to the other. His eyes never left me, and for the first time in 10 years, I saw a flicker of genuine fear in them. The confident, charming veneer he wore like armor was beginning to crack. Sarah opened the door. Standing on the porch was Gary, the process server Richard had hired. He looked exactly like what he was, a retired cop who had seen everything and cared about nothing. He didn't say a word as he stepped forward, holding out a thick manila envelope. "Are you Sarah Miller?" Gary asked, his voice a gravelly, professional drone. "Yes," she said, her voice tilting upward into a question, her hand trembling slightly as she reached out to take the envelope. "You've been served. Have a nice day," Gary said. He turned on his heel, walked down the porch steps, and disappeared down the driveway without looking back. Sarah stood in the open doorway, the heavy envelope in her hands. She stared down at the bold legal lettering stamped across the front. Petition for dissolution of marriage. I watched the blood completely drain from her face, leaving her a ghostly, unnatural pale. She dropped her arms to her sides, the envelope clutching tightly against her thigh, and turned back to face me. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. "What is that, Sarah?" I asked, my voice cutting through the silence of the foyer like a scalpel. "Go ahead. Open it. Read the contents out loud so Marcus can hear it too." Marcus stepped forward, his hands coming out of his pockets, his voice raised in defensive confusion. "Wait, man, what the hell is going on? What is that? Are you divorcing her? What did she do?" I let out a short, humorless bark of a laugh that made both of them flinch. The sheer audacity of his performance was almost impressive. He was still trying to play the protective best friend, still trying to act completely oblivious to the radioactive bomb that was about to detonate in the middle of the room. "Drop the act, Marcus," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, quiet whisper. "I was here last night. midnight. The room became entirely airless. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy with the sudden, crushing weight of their exposed guilt. The realization hit them at the exact same moment. I watched Marcus's eyes widen, his chest heaving as his breathing turned shallow. Sarah dropped the envelope onto the hardwood floor with a soft, hollow thud. She clamped both hands over her mouth, a strangled, pathetic sob escaping her throat. "No," she whispered, her eyes welling with instant tears. "No, no, no. Oh my God, no. It's not what you think. It was a mistake. I swear to you, it was a mistake." "A mistake?" I interrupted, stepping closer to her, forcing her to look into my eyes. "A mistake happens once, Sarah. A mistake is accidental. What you two have been doing, in my house, on my couch, in my bed, while I was out working to pay for the roof over your heads, that's not a mistake. That's a choice. Dozens of choices, actually." Marcus took a step toward me, his hands raised in a pleading gesture. "Bro, look, listen to me. I am so sorry. I swear to God, man, I was in a bad place, and things got out of hand. We didn't mean to hurt you. Please, let's just sit down and talk about this like men." "Talk about it like men?" I asked, turning my gaze to him. The sheer look of disgust on my face made him stop in his tracks. "You sat at my kitchen island and drank my whiskey while planning how to slide into my bed the second I left town. I brought you into my home when you had nothing, Marcus. I called you my brother, and you repaid me by destroying the only thing in this world I cared about. You're not a man. You're a parasite." Sarah fell to her knees on the floor, grabbing the hem of my jeans, her face soaked in tears. "Please, please don't do this. Don't throw away everything we built. I love you. I swear I love you. He didn't mean anything to me. It was just, I was lonely and he was here and I made a horrible mistake. Please, can we just go to counseling? We can fix this. We can get through this." I looked down at her, clutching at my legs, begging for a mercy she had never shown me. A month ago, seeing her cry like this would have broken my heart into a million pieces. I would have done anything to take her pain away. But looking at her now, all I felt was a profound, chilling emptiness. The woman I loved was gone. She probably never existed in the first place. This person on the floor was a stranger who had worn her face while stabbing me in the back. I reached down, gently but firmly prying her fingers away from my jeans, and stepped back out of her reach. "There is nothing to fix, Sarah. The marriage is over. Look at the paperwork. You have exactly 48 hours to pack your things and vacate this house. Richard Vance is my attorney. If you or your lawyer have anything to say, you say it to him. Do not call me. Do not text me. If you show up here after 48 hours, I will have the police remove you for trespassing." I turned my attention back to Marcus, who was standing like a statue, his face completely blank with shock. "And you. You have 10 minutes to get every single piece of garbage you own out of my house. If anything belonging to you is left here past 12:40, it's going straight into the bonfire in the backyard. Get out of my sight." Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, to offer another pathetic excuse, but the cold, murderous finality in my eyes told him everything he needed to know. He turned around without a word, hurried down the hallway to the spare room, and began throwing his clothes into his duffel bags. Sarah stayed on the floor, her shoulders shaking with violent, uncontrollable sobs, staring at the legal documents scattered across the hardwood. I didn't say another word to her. I didn't scream, I didn't break anything, and I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose my mind. I walked past her, picked up my own duffel bag from the foyer, and walked out the front door, closing it quietly behind me. I got back into my Honda Accord and started the engine. As I pulled out of the driveway and drove down the quiet suburban street, I looked in the rearview mirror one last time at the house we had bought together. The sky was still gray, but the rain had completely stopped. The road ahead of me was going to be long, brutal, and incredibly lonely. The divorce would take months, the legal battles would be exhausting, and the emotional scars would likely stay with me for the rest of my life. Trust was a luxury I wouldn't be able to afford for a very long time. But as I turned onto the main highway, leaving the wreckage of my old life behind in the distance, a strange sense of peace washed over me. I was broken, but I was free. They thought they could destroy me in the dark, but I had stepped out into the light, and for the first time in weeks, I could finally breathe.